Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is Dave Beasley, who has been working with subscription businesses and many different brands for a number of years, and excited to have him on the show. So, Dave, thanks for being with us.
Hey, glad to be here today, Nick. I'm honored to be your 58th
Yeah,
episode.
we are getting up
Assuming
there.
assuming we make it through this, I have the potential to be your 58th guest
Yeah,
today.
I have no doubt we will. So, yeah, it's amazing to think we got over that 50 mark. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks. For the listeners that don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of the brands that you've worked with, a little bit of your background.
Funny thing about my brands, and I didn't realize this till later, is that I've worked the three major brands that I've worked for are AT&T, ADT, and Allstate. Three. This is like
Recognizable.
I'm working my way through the
Yeah.
library or the alphabet, and
Start at the
if
top.
I guess if you look at the trajectory, that means I've got like a 400-year career ahead of me based on the slowness that I'm working through the A's, but. That actually just occurred to me the other. Maybe my next job is Amazon.
Oh, there you
Maybe
go.
maybe
There you
that's
go.
a or Amco transmission or something. But when I think about my career, it occurred to me about 25 years into my career actually that the thing that I love most about business and the thing I love most about products and the things that I love most about marketing is what I would call this Rubik's Cube of managing a subscription business. And it just hit me one day, and it's like, I don't care what company I'm working for. I don't care what product I'm working for. The thing that to me is just most enjoyable about business is what I would say, I call it the Rubik's Cube, the challenge of constantly trying to figure out how to perfectly thread the needle of all the moving parts that make up a subscription business. And it's that was kind of my career epiphany, is that whatever I do and wherever I do it and whoever I do it for, that's what I really want to be spending my time working on and so forth. Maybe you've had a similar
Yeah.
epiphany. It took me 20 some years to kind of realize that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and I love the Rubik's Cube analogy there. One of the things I think is a little unique about subscription, every business is moving forward and changing, but with subscription, because it's kind of a continuous delivery, you're constantly
Yeah.
never stopping looking for ways to optimize that business. Whether it's on the front
Yeah.
end or the back end or everywhere in the middle, you're constantly working on the business.
And I guess I could call it a constant challenge or a constant opportunity, depending
Hmm.
on kind of what your
Right.
relative degree of a mood is that day. But yeah, it's like a puzzle that you are always trying to optimize. And how can I drive a tenth of a percent better conversion today? How can
Hmm.
I lower my churn by 1/10 of 1 point, and just the amount of cerebral activity that I have exerted on seemingly such trivial tasks over the years. It's either impressive or something else. But these are the things that keep me up at night.
It is. And with a lot of the guests, especially those that have worked on both the retail side and the subscription side, I try to, like, on the show, extract what's different about subscription. And sometimes it's really hard to illustrate or talk about it, but I've worked with both types of merchants and it is very different. The organization is structured different. They think about things different, they approach problems different. But for you, what would you say is different about subscription?
I would say that the thing that's most different is that I will say two things. Most companies or most organizations, particularly as they've moved into the e-commerce realm, kind of their DNA is just, I want to get you to the finish line. I just want to get you to the finish line and put it in the basket and hit buy, and the marketers behind the scene are high-fiving and so forth. And tomorrow we'll figure out how to retarget and see if you want to buy again and so
Yeah.
forth. And it's just kind of the thought process that you have an ongoing relationship with this customer, and that getting them to the finish line is really just getting them to sign up is just the start of the
Yep.
journey. It is an arduous task, and each part of the journey requires different behaviors, different metrics, different value proposition, and so forth. So you've got this concert and at best it is a concert. It's a well orchestrated concert working together. At its worst, it's this cacophony of functions just drowning each other out. And I've certainly worked on both. So to get back to your question, I think the thing that's most challenging is that I am making people aware of my product or service at the same time I'm renewing somebody on the other end, and that is such a divergent amount of activity, and any company that doesn't realize that going into it, I'm not going to say they're set up to fail, but it is so much different than an e-commerce where I'm just trying to get somebody to put my product in the cart and hit purchase. So much
So
different.
much different. Yeah, I like that where you said getting something in the cart. Well, that's the end of the journey for the typical retail marketer for subscription. That's just the beginning of the journey, right?
And getting, I mean, look, e-commerce is hard. I mean, I'm just amazed that when you think about what digital marketing is, in most cases, you're dealing with millions of impressions to ultimately get thousands of people to look at your cart. And it's just crazy when you think about it. And it's crazy when you think about there's a million people starting at the top of my funnel, and I'm lucky to get 1,000. To think about all the work to get somebody to purchase it, and then you and I laugh and say there's a different way to do this and so
Yeah.
forth. I got to think that any smart company with a good CFO or a director of revenue or whatever, you see it more than I do. But if you can turn this into some form of a recurring revenue model, I mean, that's probably what every guest talks to you about is kind of the magic of recurring revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think there's an argument that some would say on the transactional side, we do want, they do want repeat customers. They want them to come back, and there's loyalty programs and, things like that that are put in place to get customers to come back. But
Sure.
the big difference is you do have to sell to them every single time. Whereas in
Oh my
subscription,
God.
as long as
Yeah.
you continue to deliver value and engage with that customer, they expect to transact with you every month or a year, however often you're going
Yeah.
to bill them, right?
Totally. And I mean, to go back into my career and so forth, the first product that I really sold was a analog cable TV, and I guess if you go back in the 1980s, and it just shows you how much technology changed. That was high tech back then, but it kind of hit me at that point. Is that, oh my gosh, if I can make this sale,
Yeah.
then we're going to put them in the billing system, and we're going to start cranking out a paper bill to them every month. And then I started thinking, I was probably too naive in my career to think about, like lifetime value and MPVs and stuff like that. But I thought, how cool. Once we put this account in the billing system and start sending them a paper bill every month, which creates a whole separate set of problems. It's like, okay, we've done something good here and so forth. And, yeah, I think to a certain extent, a lot of us, what we did early in our career kind of shapes who we become as business people and marketers. And I was fortunate enough to kind of dive into a nascent, a billing type of product and so forth. And I guess I'm the first person in the history of your show who would call analog cable TV a high tech product and so forth.
And this is the
So
first time I've heard that.
probably,
Yes, yes, it is.
yes, it'll last as well. Yes.
Well, was it there at that time when you started seeing the power of subscription? Did you actively seek out that similar type role or AD and ADT specifically to stay in that lane, or did you just kind of
Yeah.
find yourself there?
I think at some point I realized that there was a home services was a better way to categorize it than a specific company or product or technology. And I think then all of a sudden you start realizing some of the similarities. Every company has a different value proposition and customer base and price, whatever. But at the same time, I would argue there's more similarity as a marketer and a product person than there is dissimilarity. I mean, to a certain extent, you're trying to work your way into their monthly budget and so forth, and you're using a variety of competitive differentiators and different marketing channels and so forth. And it occurred to me at that point that it was not very easy, but it was very transferable. Over my career, I've seen a lot of people define themselves by a certain category. I'm a cable TV person, I'm a telephone person, or whatever, and miss the other narrative, which is what is truly the function. I'm a great financial person, or I'm a great supply chain person, or I'm a subscription marketer, and so forth. And I've seen a lot of careers kind of sub-optimized because people can't step out of that industry or category, and so forth. I think that the other thing that was amazing to me is so you think about, okay, subscriptions in the video realm, subscriptions in the broadband realm, subscriptions in the home services, and then I got to roadside services, a category that you're somewhat familiar with as well. And it kind of hit me the same, is that fundamentally there's really no difference between roadside service and video. Just replace the word service call with sending out a tow truck.
Right.
And it's 90% the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a service, you've got features, you've got capabilities, you've got billing. It's just a little bit different delivery of the service and so forth. But that was another magic moment for me.
Yeah.
It's like, look, I've done this before. I don't need to be intimidated by this at all. I know the playbook.
Insurance has this unique aspect to it, though, that I said before, now with subscription, you need to be continuously delivering value. The interesting thing about subscription is both you and they hope they never need to use your service, right?
That makes me a little bit of a black sheep and outlier in the subscription industry, because I'm selling a product that nobody wants to
Yeah.
use, and you and I could do a master course on how challenging that is. I'm asking you to pay me $100 year over year after year, and neither of us want to see
Right.
me and so forth, and that does create a different set of challenges and so forth. So
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to pay a subscription box service $100 a year and pray that the mail doesn't deliver it
Yep.
and so forth.
Well, as much experience as you have in direct to consumer marketing, what were some of the channels that you were using early on? I assume things like direct mail were big and they're still around today. That is not dead. But how have you seen that evolve?
Yeah, it's funny, as I still like direct mail, but it's to a certain extent I'm embarrassed to say that.
I don't think you should be.
hopefully this will be. I think luckily this is buried 11 minutes into your podcast and so forth. But what I will say is I like channels that work. All right, so to a certain extent, the best channel is the channel that works. I'll give you an example. One of my biggest customer bases when I was with Allstate recently was with AARP. And AARP, as you know, is like the largest nonprofit membership in America. There's 20 million households and 30 million customers. In 2021, direct mail was still the single biggest channel for driving new customer acquisition and so forth. So, as a smart marketer, you don't just systematically decide that channel's not cool anymore. But to answer your question, people of my generation grew up in a pre-digital world, so we were grounded in direct mail and print, and just a lot of press releases and so forth. And anybody my age or my longevity in marketing has to be a digital marketer, and you've had to have made that transition over time and so forth. And luckily, I was wise and savvy enough to realize it. One of the things we did in the roadside category, and literally 5 years ago, we were getting 80 to 85% of our new customers through direct mail and outbound telemarketing. And at one point, we said that's just crazy. It's really not good for the brand either. And within the course of 3 or 4 years, we kind of flipped the model so that 90% of the business was coming in digital. And now you and I could spend 2 hours talking about the benefits of kind of that digital relationship versus the offline. I think the point that I would leave here, though, is that anytime somebody just says, I'm a digital marketer, I shudder a little bit. I mean, I would rather hear them say, I'm a marketer and I primarily use digital channels for the business. But just you call yourself a digital marketer. When I hear that, I think, well, then you're not a complete marketer and so forth, which probably then makes me whatever. But,
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree with you much more there. I remember when, and again, I worked for a very large direct mail company sending hundreds of millions of pieces a year in direct mail. And then all of a sudden, there started to emerge this digital marketing team. And 3,500 people that work for this company were like, I'm sorry, what's that? And what do they do? And,
yeah.
I don't think even they knew when they got started, but, that started the shift, right? And things were, but it was interesting because it either sat in one of the two camps. Like people got divided from digital to just general
Yeah.
or print or whatever. And then, of course, they started shifting the other way. But I think now we've gone so far into, well, you really need both that to your point, you really don't even need to classify that way anymore.
Right, it's
It's
marketing, and
marketing.
one of the things you could probably find a variety of much smarter, opinionated people. But my understanding is that direct mail response rates actually went up in many cases during COVID
Mm-hmm.
simply because I am using myself an example. The first 6 months of COVID, going out to the mailbox was like a highlight for me.
Yep.
And I was
Mm-hmm.
getting less mail, and being remote based, I spent more time looking at the mail than ever. I know from our perspective, we saw direct mail rates at Allstate go up 20 to 25%. And
Mm-hmm.
in an era where you were dealing with higher postage and higher shipping costs or whatever, that didn't suck. I mean, it was that bump in response was necessary to keep the ROI in
Yeah.
line and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think anybody who's in the subscription business immediately gravitates towards the digital model, and I am 99% behind that. But I will also kind of pull them off to the side eventually and say, "Let's look. There's other ways to get in front of people
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
and so forth." I just
Well, I think what a lot of seen on the digital side is that, well, number one, costs have gone way, 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 way up, right? The cost of those impressions, Facebook or otherwise, even now into influencer marketing and those other types of things, those touch points, there's so much competition that the buy rates just keep going up and up and up, right? So maybe looking at some of those other channels that others may have turned an eye to, turn their back on, like direct mail, are worth revisiting.
Yeah, and again, going back to some time I spent at ADT, one of our best channels was like Valpak
Mm,
or what I would call
yep.
these shared mailer things. And
Yeah.
again, this is like the least sexy thing that's ever been discussed on your show and so forth. But depending
Mm,
on what product or what category you're in, um, if you can execute and really think through a good buy. I was acquiring customers more cost effectively through Valpak than I was at a time through some of my organic stuff, where I was paying crazy amounts of money for people to develop content and trying to do 1,000 different landing pages or whatever. And it just hit me one day. It's like, either, I mean, obviously my organic SEO cost should not have been so high. But when I saw that my cost of acquisition through Valpak was actually better than some of these digital channels, it told me a couple things. Number one, don't throw out
right.
any channel that's working, and
Hmm.
obviously number two is that there's no reason that my SEO cost should have been so high.
Yeah. Well, you can extract a lot of value from a channel like that when everybody else starts to think that, hey, this is the only way to do it. And,
Yeah,
consumers, there's only so many impressions available out there to anybody in a given day. So, to your point, when COVID hit and all of a sudden we're at home more, going out to the mailbox, people were paying more attention to mail than ever before. And all of a sudden that became a very viable channel. So, I think you just got to be nimble, right?
yeah, totally. The other thing that really was the big change is if you think about, I'm going to go back a little bit more again, and hopefully I can contemporize this. For a long time, when you think about the subscription world, I mean, I think of publishers, newspapers, magazines, and that was kind of their model. And then I think of kind of the home services and so forth. And in both of those cases, what you really had was a network, whether it be a printing or publishing network, or an owned network, whether it be a cable strung up on the telephone poles, or broadband, or telephony, or home security. But in each of these cases, it was a network that somebody had invested, and the way they monetized that was through a recurring subscription. When you were able to bypass that, it was an incredible game changer. If you think about the video business, for example, what DirecTV and the Dish Network did, when you look back at it in hindsight, again, you're saying they're stupid dishes, but think about how revolutionary that was to say we no longer need to have all this $10,000 per mile cable sitting in everybody's backyard, and we can just beam it down from outer space. And then you go one step further and say, screw that. You can just do it all through your broadband connection. And all of a sudden, it just exploded this concept of you no longer need to go through a technology. You no longer need to go through a network. On the retail side, you no longer need to go through a brick and mortar store. And to me, that was kind of the inflection point, is when broadband got to the point that you could say, I don't need this middleman now. I don't need this wholesaler. I can begin forming my direct relationship with customers. I mean, that. If you and I are writing the history of the subscription, we have to put a chapter in for that. I mean, what a massive kind of the digital transformation inflection point and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think, again, you see more of it than I do, but from that point on, all of a sudden, it's like you don't need to be constrained by a network. You don't need to be constrained by a brick and mortar retailer. You can form your own relationship with customers. How cool is that?
Well, and that's what subscription is today, right? I mean, the direct to
Yeah.
consumer opportunity that so many, for years, retailers in particular, were like, no, I'll just, work through my distributors. I don't need that. Now all want that, right? They want that direct connection.
So as you talk to people each week, is there a cumulative fatigue where at some point it's just everybody's jumping in the pool at the same time, or are you saying, look, the highway's big enough for everybody?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I like how you're turning this around right now and asking me the questions, but yeah, the theme I've heard is everyone is aware of subscription fatigue, that it's out there and it's real, and just the churn rates in general that so many are seeing are because consumers are more aware of what they're doing. And now you've even got Truebill and others out there that are popping up and saying, hey, you probably have too many subscriptions, we'll help you figure it out. So
Which I love. I love it that Truebill exists. I
yeah,
think it's so great that there's technology that helps the consumer make sense of it all,
yeah,
and to the extent that there's some less than great companies who hide their cancellation policies and so forth. I don't know much about Truebill, but in my mind, it's kind of like
yeah.
a necessary gatekeeper for
It,
the
it,
for
it
the
it
industry.
is. It is. And, I think there'll be some others that adapt that capability that they have to identify subscriptions and help you cancel. But, there's clearly a need for that, right? There's people that want that because it is hard to keep up with all the subscriptions that you have. So standing out now and delivering value is so much more important than it's ever been. Um, and the ways that you now can stand out are around the theme I'm seeing is be be niche enough that you can address a community in a way that Amazon can't. Because let's all face it, that's probably what you're dealing with in a lot of cases is, subscribe and save or something to that effect around that. But what Amazon
Right.
doesn't seem to want to do is, hey, if I sell recurring lipstick, on I'll send you a different color each month. They can start to create a community around beauty and conversation around that. And if
Right.
you focus on that, you can differentiate in a way, even if you can't undercut Amazon on price, they can't beat you on community. And that's a great way to stand out.
So I agree, but once you go niche and you go community, we come back to what you talked about before, which is the increasing digital channel cost and so
Sure.
forth. And that becomes a crazy point as well. The price of getting into pay per click, the price of retargeting, the price of affiliate marketing, the price of finding other means of getting in front of consumers. And I would love to sit down and look at some of the business models of some of these startup companies. I'm always fascinated by churn. I'm always fascinated by acquisition cost as it relates to how can you really scale your business at these economics and so forth. And I'm sure there's really smart and enterprising people that are doing it, but it's kind of the triage that I'm always looking for is what how big is your audience, what's your acquisition cost, and what's your churn model. And if you and I had that information, we could probably quickly form a point of view on what the company's trajectory
Yeah,
is.
I think you could get there pretty quickly. I will say
Yeah.
one thing, is that obviously the subscription industry is exploding and, it's supposed to hit 1.5 trillion by 2025. The one of the reasons for that is because the barriers of entry are lower than they've ever been. With the internet, the ubiquity of the internet, and then all of these cloud-based services that you can spin up, and many of them in a matter of hours, to have, your subscription system, your fulfillment system, your CRM system. You can have all of these things stood up pretty quickly, and even your storefront, through something like
Yeah.
Shopify, it doesn't take very long. You can get there rather quickly, which allows you to kind of experiment. You don't have to spend $100,000 just to start something out of your garage and see if it has any traction to it. So I think that's a
Yeah,
big
that should be
driver,
our
right?
next reality show. How fast can you start a subscription business reality show?
Yeah,
Because you would argue that you could do it in hours probably if you have all the right
I
tools.
like that. It would be fun to actually come up with something and then just document, okay, I'm starting this race. How
Yeah.
quickly can I get this, up and running? I got to believe it could be done in less than a week. I may be able to do it in less than a day. I don't know.
Yeah, so we've gone from talking about direct mail at minute 11 to starting up a subscription business in an hour at minute 24.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but it truly does show you the level of change that has happened in all business and
Yeah.
so forth. And since we started this podcast, there's probably a few more subscription ideas that have been
Probably.
envisioned and rolled
Yep.
out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you were at Allstate for what was it, 7 years?
Yeah, very interesting as you and I were talking about the roadside category.
Yeah. Well, so that you were there during the whole, I would call subscription explosion. Of course, it's been around for a very long time, but through that, what did you guys, if anything, fundamentally do different as you saw? Was there more competition? Did you see that, or was it just, yeah,
Yeah,
there, to use your quote, there's plenty of room on the highway for all of us.
well, which is what Allstate wants. I'll give you hopefully a productive story here. If you're in the roadside assistance category, the first thing you realize is that AAA is like the gold standard for
Hmm.
memberships. At some point, everybody in the subscription industry should be required to spend a couple hours studying the history of AAA, which to this day still has, I want to say, 65 or 70 million members. Unbelievable subscriber loyalty. I mean, you talk about a product that has had people for 30 or 40 years. And in all fairness, no matter how hard we looked at it, we said, look, I don't really, everybody has this bravado. And at no time were we able to say, look, this is how you can materially steal market share away from them. So at some point we said we have to reinvent ourselves, and this was kind of when Uber and Lyft were taking off, and we said why can't we do the same thing with roadside that you do with Uber and Lyft, which is get away from this expensive call center experience where you don't know what's going on, you're scared to death, you're waiting on the highway, and blah blah blah. We said we if you have a smartphone and GPS, we can digitize that entire experience. And so some really smart and agile people, we developed a better way to deliver roadside. And where we failed was we had this great service, this service that proven gives them much greater satisfaction and scores and so forth. And we said, let's push it out there on demand and so forth because you'll need it moment the time of need and blah blah blah. Didn't go anywhere because it was too difficult to get that in front of somebody at the time of need and so forth. And so at some point we said, well, we really have a nice technology, but our go-to-market strategy just wasn't right. When we took that same fundamental experience, that customer experience, and said, well, let's go back and renovate our old Allstate Motor Club and our old roadside products, it was a game changer for us. I'm not saying we knocked AAA off their perch, but it totally invigorated the membership category and so forth because you had a new experience, you had a better experience, and we were no longer talking about, hey, join Motor Club and you get 20% off at Applebee's. You truly had a better fundamental experience, and then we used that to get renewed growth out of memberships and so forth. So this is a case where we use technology to dramatically enhance the kind of an old dusty experience and so forth. So we missed. We convinced ourselves that this was an on-demand product, and when it's all said and done, strike one up for members. Members want this. People want this in a membership. People want this in an app. People want to know that when I need it, it's on my phone. It's an app. My stuff is preloaded. All I have to do is hit the button. They don't want to have to fill out all that information. When your wife's sitting on the highway with a flat tire,
Hmm.
she does not want to go through all that and so forth.
Yeah.
So, even in something as old and outdated as your grandfather's roadside assistance, there's room for innovation. There's room for digital transformation. And there's ways to bring new audiences into it. So I'm not sure that's the greatest case study ever, but it was really interesting to me is that I found myself being drawn towards on demand, which isn't horrible, but the moral of the story is we ended up using it to
Yeah.
drive subscriptions deeper.
No, that's a great story. I like it a lot. So the Allstate roadside product, is that always have to be coupled with Allstate insurance, or could that be separate?
No, so insurance is think of property and casualty insurance as a heavily regulated business where companies like Allstate and State Farm and Geico and Liberty, they're fighting like hell and spending $2 billion a year to get you to purchase auto insurance and homeowners insurance. Roadside assistance is kind of adjunct to that. It's most cases it's regulated differently and so forth. Insurance companies offer roadside service because it's something that people want, but it is a separate, independent line of business, and Allstate chose to use it offensively, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but Allstate said if we can provide a great roadside experience, we can make some money there, but we can also use it as a lead gen for the rest of the business and so forth. So what we were luckily able to do was to use kind of this new technology and this new focus on membership to not only increase the economic performance of a business unit, but then positively bring a halo back to the property and casualty insurance, which, as you know, is just a crazy market and so forth. So it's everybody has some form of roadside, whether it be through warranty in your car, or maybe you've got it through your credit card or something. Most people have multiple forms of roadside that they're not even aware of, and so forth. Yeah.
Interesting. So did that hypothesis play out in that the roadside members that signed up through that marketing effort then were able to be referred into insurance customers?
I'd like to say that it was a great hypothesis, and I'd like to say you didn't see me on the cover of Ad Age, did you? But the reality is that in the property and casualty insurance wars that are going on your TV all day and every day, it wasn't a big enough needle mover to make Allstate stand out versus Geico or State Farm or whatever. So if you and I were given $500 million to figure out how to differentiate, we could come up with lots of ways to do it. Roadside would be on the wall of, we'd put a post-it note up for roadside, but it would not make it to the top of the list. There's other ways to differentiate, and I guess it makes sense because, again, you're going back to fundamentally kind of an unsavory thing that people really don't want to think or talk about and so forth.
Well, for a while there, were you doing the inverse, which was maybe using this built-in base of Allstate insurance customers to market the roadside product to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that when you work for a large corporation, you have built-in audiences and so forth, and so I think about the startups out there who are listening to your show, and it's tough because you don't have an embedded base of 10 or 15 million people to market to, and I can tell you that when you've got that embedded base of 10 or 15 million, you get a lot of organic growth out of that and so forth. So that is one of the reasons that big companies always have such an advantage. The caveat there is that to a certain extent, you need to be, if you've got 10 million customers, you got to be careful what that dialogue is. You can't just be selling them stuff every week and so forth. But diversification certainly is a big thing. When I think about our customer acquisition, probably 75% of our customers that we acquired were existing auto insured. And since the economics of that were so positive, it allowed us a little bit more leeway and a little bit more acquisition costs to, as I would say, go broad market and use some of these more expensive channels to bring in new people to roadside and then expose them to Allstate and so forth. So, when you're doing it inside a big company, it's more complicated. There's different audiences and different segments than when you're just starting up from scratch and so forth. It's just a little bit more complex and a few more guardrails, but boy, it certainly helps to have that built-in audience.
Yeah, and that's I think actually a fairly unique perspective that you had both the affiliate marketing component as well as the just direct to consumer greenfield in what you were trying to do, because it tends to be one or the other. There's not that many that are actually trying to do a component of both. I do think though that those that are doing startup, their independent subscription, need to make sure that some sort of affiliate marketing is somewhere in their plan because of the power in that. And I know that there's concern around rev shares and commissions and things like that, but brand recognition and for a consumer to have a brand that they trust already, offering them here's a partner of ours. We trust them, we vetted them, we think they're a good partner. You should consider their product goes so far, don't you think?
Totally. I don't know how a startup can't not heavily grapple with the partnership question, and I break it down a little bit more. So there's different types of partnerships. There's pure marketing partnerships. There's product partnerships. There's strategic partnerships, and the easiest thing to always do is a marketing partnership. Hey, let me buy some ads on your space, or can I send an email to your customers and so forth. And that's such a quick way of saying, is there a linkage between my product and your company or whatever. Product relationships, everybody seems to gravitate to. Hey, let me API my product into yours, or let's set up some complicated relationship and so forth. And those take so long, and they're so complicated, and developers get involved, and nobody knows the economics. I'm a big believer in always start off with a marketing partnership. Let's see if your customers want to buy my product, and let's see if my customers want to buy your product. And if it's I call it like the first date. If the first date goes well, then let's talk about a relationship and so forth. And then ultimately, if everything goes well, you can really think about strategic partnerships. But for a lot of products and a lot of categories, there's just not that much organic consumer interest in it and so forth, right? It's very easy to go on Google and say how many people are searching for keywords that relate to my category, and for a lot of startups and so forth, you cannot delude yourself and just say, hey, we're just gonna do it on our own and so forth. You're just not going to get far enough and so forth, and so you really have to think more broadly about it and say, I use the word contextually. What are the right contextual partnerships where I can put my product in front of others? I mean, one of the things that again, putting an Allstate product in front of ARP customers, or putting a roadside product in front of 17 million Exxon Mobil credit card customers,
There you
or
go.
whatever. I mean, that's
Yep.
those audiences are gold and so forth, and you get more productivity out of that than finding 17 million on Google paid search.
Yep.
You probably need to do both to a certain extent, but I'm going to stop just short of saying if you have a startup product, and of course we can talk about what the product and categories. I certainly hope that you are strategically thinking about partnerships and so forth. What are audiences that make sense for you to figure out a way to get in front of?
Yeah. So in my former life at Affinion, our biggest marketing channel or partnerships were through financial institutions. So our
Yeah,
roadside assistance product, our insurance products, all of these things that we really marketed through these FIs to their base of customers. Yes, there was absolutely the component of the incremental revenue it could create for them, but it was also the loyalty and further ingrains customers with their own brand, knowing that I'm going to
totally.
bring products to you that I think are good products that are, going to protect your family, or, have all of those things that you come to me for banking anyway that, I can tie into. But that power of linking those two things together really helps both brands.
Oh, it truly is a win-win situation if both sides really think about it in terms of what's in it for my partner as well. If it's just let me grab something from you, it doesn't work. But if I mean, it's like anything. If you truly say what's in it for me, what's in it for you, how can you grow, how can I grow, and how can each of our bases benefit from this? You're right, man. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
It's got to be relevant though. It's got to be believable. You can't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I don't want to sell roadside with Budweiser. No offense to Budweiser, but I could get in front of a big audience, but it's not conceptually relevant to me and so
Definitely.
forth.
Definitely. Yeah. Consumers can see right through that. That was an extreme example, but yeah,
Right.
consumers can see through that if there's not a
I hope
relationship.
Budweiser does not. I hope Budweiser does not boycott your podcast based on the
I think we're
last. You can
safe.
edit
I
this
think we're
out.
safe. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, so my last question for you, Dave, as we sit here 2 years into the pandemic, what do you think are the largest challenges for subscription brands as we sit here right now? Is it standing out from the crowd? Is it trying to predict how we're going to emerge and get to whatever new normal there is outside of the pandemic? Like, what do you think's in front of them right now?
My knee jerk reaction, and thank you for asking that, is it is really, really hard to come up with a compelling, differentiating message, first of all, something that is tangible, and then figuring out how to cut through the amazing clutter with that message. And if you're lucky enough to have a relevant message, and if you're relevant enough and it's a good message and it's a differentiated message, good luck. And it's still finding the channels that you can deliver it is so challenging and very expensive and so forth. I mean, again, it's like threading the needle. You have to have a compelling message. You have to have some way to differentiate, and then you got to find some channels that work for you. And that is so difficult. And everybody says, well, we've got a great content marketing plan and so forth, and everybody's using social media, and everybody kind of has the same playbook because almost everybody has to. And that's what I see as such a challenger for every marketer out there is, to a certain extent, we're all trying the same formula. Some of us are better at it than others. Right. There's always some luck involved. Some of us have better products. Some of us have better resources. But to a certain extent, it's kind of, we've all got the same cookbook, and the cookbook is the same, and the number of people coming into the kitchen is increasing and so forth. And it is so difficult to be successful.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but just difficult.
It's difficult. Well,
I don't want to be cynical. It's just a challenge to figure out how to cut through the clutter.
Yeah, well, to use your analogy, we are all trying to bake the same cake, but the recipe's changing, right? Because the ingredients in the world around us is changing. So,
right.
Yeah, it's not a playbook that's going to work the same in 2022 as it is going to be in 2025.
And that's why people like me need to keep learning, and that's why people like me need to learn from new and startup and so forth. Because again, it's for me to say direct mail is the answer. It's just such a misguided statement, and that's what's so exciting about being, still relevant and watching and hopefully participating, is that there's so much perspective that I can learn from new technologies and new approaches and so forth. And so, you got to keep adding to the cookbook.
100%. And one of the things that I love about the subscription and payments industry is that, well, on one hand, many of us are competing with each other for the same customers, for the same dollars. The industry in general is very cooperative. Like there isn't this, horde of, my information and I don't want to share it with anybody else. I mean, it feels like the lines of communication are always open because there's so much information to consume. None of us have all of it. No one is a complete, well-rounded subscription expert. That doesn't exist, and it never will exist. But this network of people who are willing to work with each other, I think, is pretty amazing.
Kudos to the vendors as well. There are so many talented and smart solutions and vendors that do a really good job of sharing best practices and so forth as well. And I think that's important as well, because I've seen categories where it's like, well, I can't talk about what they're doing, I can't share. But if you have smart, cutting edge, best in class vendors who are willing to share all that, everybody, it raises the level of everybody. Yeah. So I think you made a brilliant point there.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I loved having this conversation and talking about the marketing end of things. If any of the listeners heard anything today, want to talk to you and maybe pick your brain, how can they do that?
I'd say the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I think I'm DBs on DBEAS on LinkedIn and so forth. Pretty easy to find. Just kind of look for a bald guy with a blue sports coat on, and send me a note. And I enjoy talking about home services. I enjoy talking about all parts of the funnel. Debating with you on what your attention should be, talk about acquisition costs, and I just love listening and learning and so forth as well. And that's why I enjoyed being on this as well, just because it's just kind of part of hopefully my curiosity of continuing to learn and hopefully share a little bit as well.
100%. I mean, that's the main reason why I do this. I love doing this podcast because of all of the interesting people that I get to talk to and all I get to learn from them. It's not, you can't buy this kind of experience. So thank you so much for coming on today.